Hi folks, my name's Tom McCormick. I was born in Hartford, raised in Hartford, taught school in Hartford. And presently I live with my wife Diane, and I got a son, Ben, who's up in Cambridge. You know, this really kid on the go, just got his master's degree in music and a wonderful musician. And I'm kind of in the position now where I'm retired, and I was thinking about, what do I do with my time? And I used to play a lot of volleyball and used to like to go skiing, but then I got a back injury, can't do that. So I organic garden a lot, kind of one of my passions. And then I was thinking, what should I do? How can I contribute a little bit to society and what's going on in the world? And one thing I've always done was read a lot of nonfiction books, sometimes like once a week. So kind of turns out I know a bit about what's going on, and I think I got a view of what's going on. And I think what's going on is really to the detriment of our society. It's the detriment of our citizens. I got a big view of things. I take a planetary view, kind of like I view like the world and things like the astronaut who views the Earth from space and says, this is one world and we're one people, and that's how we got to think about things, and when I find that women are being raped in rape camps in the Civil War in South Sudan, kind of rips my heart out. How can this go on? Or somewhere in northern India, kids are starving to death. How can this go on? Why is it? Or the United States does things like blockade Iraq and prevents medicine from going to Iraq because they want to overthrow a government. And hundreds of thousands of kids die of diarrhea. There's a lot going on in the world that's just plain wrong. And I think I have a whole lot better answer than my opponent in the first Congressional District election. His answer to things are to build more weapons, for the United States to militarily dominate the world, to go around the world and grab what we can to support what quote unquote is considered our national interest. I don't think our national interest is taking other people's oil. Like Trump said, loudly and clearly, we fought this war in Iraq and we didn't take the oil. I'm not out to take anybody's oil. I'm not out to take anybody's diamonds, anybody's gold, or anybody's food. And partly that's what's going on in the world. And lots of times we don't realize that in America, and even people who consider themselves poor are really got a first-class ticket. And it's a really luxurious ticket. Even the poorest in Hartford, you think, God, my life is tough, I'm barely making it, have to kind of in a way realize that they are so much better off than so many other people in the world. And that question to me is one that needs to be addressed. There's kind of a religious saying, I don't know who said it, but there's a saying, but there for the grace of God go I. Why is it that if this soul is born in one place, things go okay for them? They're born in another place, things can be very bad. Women are sold into sexual slavery. Women have kids. They have 5 kids, and 3 of them are dead by the time they're 3 or 4 years old. People drinking dirty water all over the world, getting cholera. The question to me is kind of why. And part of the answer is that the United States has just taken too much of God's bounty of the earth. And we've taken it in a way that's simply just armed theft and murder. I was a young man time of the Vietnam War. And a lot of people were for it. And I said, this is wrong. Why are Americans going to Vietnam to try to rule people that are thousands and thousands of miles away? And why are we killing them? Why are we bombing them? Why are we dropping more bombs on Laos than we dropped on the Germans in World War II? What did they ever do to us? And the answer, they never did anything to us. But we wanted their resources. We wanted their timber. or if it came to it, we wanted their farmland, or now there's oil off the coast of Vietnam and maybe we want to take their oil. And it's just flat out morally indefensible. The United States is a military empire with bases all over the world that coerce and seek to dominate others, and I'm against it. My opponent, unfortunately, while he won't say he's for it, he votes for it year after year after year. He says he wasn't for the war in Afghanistan, but every year he votes $500 billion, $600 billion. This last year, $700 billion for the Pentagon. And where's that money going? He supports money for the building, like, for instance, the F-35. It's a brand new, latest, greatest fighter jet, supposedly. And what's he want it for? Does he want it to shock and awe another country like Iraq in the future? And his only defense when you ask the guy about it is, well, there's jobs for Pratt and Whitney. But I say, well, you know, maybe there's no jobs for Pratt and Whitney, but there's other things that the workers in Pratt and Whitney could be building other than jet engines to go blast the people all over the world. And if you look, it turns out the people that are being blasted are pretty much black and brown people. And you got to think about, how does racism come into this? And I think it does. And my opponent would never say that. My opponent wants to build $8 billion subs, brand new subs down an electric boat in New London. Essentially just these floating and sunken missile silos loaded with ICBM missiles with nuclear warheads to intimidate, I don't know who, maybe the Chinese, maybe the Iranians, the Russians, I don't know who the enemy is. But he seems to think there's an enemy out there. And I think we make our enemies. And if we kind of change course a little bit, we won't have the enemies. And also, he supports building a whole new fleet of Black Hawk helicopters down at Sikorsky Aircraft. Brand new attack helicopters, Black Hawks. Well, some of us, my age, we're going to remember what the Black Hawk helicopters are all about. They're about firing on Vietnam villages and slaughtering people. He wants to spend more and more money to build these. He wants to build a brand new fleet of fast attack submarines. I don't. He wants to build more nuclear weapons. I don't. And I guess my question to you is that what you want? Do you want more nuclear weapons? Do you want more fighter planes? Do you want more aircraft carriers? Do you want more tanks, more bombs, more weapons, and more bullets? I can say this. If that's what you want, if that's who you want to elect, by all means, vote for my opponent come this fall election. But I'll tell you this, and I know it's hard to trust politicians because all the time, you know, they say one thing and they do another, but there's one absolute guarantee. You elect me, I will vote no money, never, ever for nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are the greatest sacrilege. And I use the word sacrilege there, meaning they're in violation of God's charge to us. Nuclear weapons put in the hands of man the ability to destroy God's creation. And that's the ultimate sacrilege. And it's a power we should not have. And we need to stay away from it. And I will not zero. So that's kind of where I kind of view the world, you know, from what the United States is doing militarily. My opponent voted $700 billion last time when he had the chance. I won't. And there's a few other things about what's going on in the world that really bother me. And one of them is the way women are being treated. Women basically, for so long, have been screwed over. And I'd like to use a little bit stronger word there, but I will just say they're being screwed over. And we see it everywhere. We see it horrifically in sexual slavery, where women are being kidnapped and forced into prostitution, drugged, and turned into someone's property. We see it in that they don't get educated. We see it, like in the United States more, that a woman gets a degree and she goes to get a job and she always gets an inferior position, or she's got the same skills and she goes for a position but it goes to a male instead that maybe doesn't even have the same qualifications, or if she gets the position she gets paid less. I take some of the words of, maybe not today so much, but of the days of the founding of our country in 1776. And it's very simple. The documents and why people fought. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And when people are discriminated against, in any way, whether their sex, their sexual preference, the color of their skin, their religious creed, their national origin, their ethnicity, or anything, they are denied their liberty. And that, to me, is just unacceptable. It's wrong, just de facto, it's wrong. And elect me to Congress, and I'm going to work very hard to make sure that women aren't discriminated against. That's, just kind of a given. And there's other really gross discrimination. We see it in Hartford. Hartford, you can just drive around the neighborhoods of Hartford and you see person with this skin color lives here, the person with that skin color lives there, the person with this skin color lives there. And it's all wrong. Because whether they're being directly forced to live there or they're choosing there, there's an underlying structural racism. This is the word that's being used today. People are discriminated against. And discrimination is wrong and is always wrong. It's always wrong to treat someone as a member of what you call a class or a group. And you elect me to Washington, I'm going to go down there and make sure that the housing programs are non-discriminatory. That there's no check mark to say what race you are if you get into public housing or not. Because you got to realize when public housing first started, all over America, if you were a black person, you got sent to public housing. But if you were a white person, you could get a mortgage and go live out on Long Island in the suburbs. And there's all kinds of discrimination, and it's written into deeds. And some of that legal discrimination is gone in the word of law, but it's still going on in our society, and it needs to be opposed. And one of the things I've been involved with a lot, and it's like on a card that I passed out yesterday at the Poor People's March down at the Capitol, clean air, clean water, clean soil, and clean food. When we say we have a right to life, that's what it means. And no one has the right to destroy your life through pollution. Lancet is an English health journal, publishes the latest papers of health research. It says 91 million people in the world are dying prematurely from pollution. They're breathing dirty air and getting respiratory disease. They're drinking dirty water and getting cholera. Little kids are drinking dirty water and getting diarrhea that kills them. It's just flat out immoral. It's flat out wrong. And I will oppose it with every fiber of my being. And I'm not saying that. I chaired a Sierra Club group for more than a dozen years recently that worked on issues of pollution, and the herbicides and the pesticides got to go. We need, as my webpage says, tomforcongress.org, real radical change in this country. And you could say I'm a radical, Days of Vietnam, I went up and blocked the Air Force Gate up in Westover Air Force Base where the B-52s were based flying to go to bomb Vietnam. When the United States was trying to overthrow the government in Nicaragua because we didn't like their, quote, socialism, I went and blocked gates at the CIA. When Electric Boat was building Trident submarines that can, if used, destroy the world, I went down to Electric Boat and blocked the gate. So you can say I'm a radical, and it's not something I'd say for myself. I'm saying I'm really kind of conservative guy, real basic. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. What does that mean in today's world? It means freedom of speech, and that's attacked. Freedom of thought, freedom to move where you wish, to be where you want to be, when you want to be, without interference. Free to move around. In the United States, we're kind of somewhat okay. You know, we say we have freedom of the press, but if you really look at it, we don't have freedom of press because the person that owns the press is the one that has freedom of the press. And the press in the United States today is being owned increasingly by very, very wealthy multi-billionaires. I say billionaires, well that's wrong. Multi-billionaires and huge corporations. And the news you get is told or said in a way to promote their interests as the corporations, the multinational corporations. It's not, you're not hearing the word to hear what's going to be good for you. You know, how when you go to work today and money comes out of your wallet to pay your taxes, it's not so clear about where that's money going and who's getting it. Because right now, a lot of it's going to very wealthy corporations. And in so many ways, large and small. There's just like one little example I know about because for a time I lived in a county where there was national forests. The government, your government, John Larson, my opponent, votes for this stuff. I tell you truly. They sell timber contracts out to private corporations. And it turns out the contract, the money we get back for our trees, for our resources, doesn't cover the cost of administrating the contract or building the roads so they can get there, take the trees out, or fixing up the land after. And that's wrong. And we have coal companies. They're getting subsidized with money that comes out of your wallet, my wallet, everyone's wallet, and they rip mountaintops across just Appalachia, rip them apart and leave a mess. Well, the law says they're supposed to fix it, put it back to the way it was, do they? No. What happens, and this is kind of the news you don't really get, you know, big coal corporation, they got a mine. They've taken the coal out, not profitable anymore. They'll sell it to some executives that quit their company and run it for 2 years. And then 2 years later, those guys say, oh, place bankrupt, no profit anymore. And they leave the trash behind, you know. And we're really getting stuck. We've got all these Superfund sites across the country, pollution. And a lot of these very, very polluted sites are polluted with radiation. And they've been polluted by the corporations, the chemical corporations, but also by our own government, by the Pentagon, the defense industry. The people that are supposed to be protecting us are some of the very same folks that are polluting us the most. There's places all over the country where there's heavy radiation pollution with chemicals, and it's just kind of sitting there. And it's going to cost billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars to clean it up. And I say, before there's any more spending on the military for new jets and planes and aircraft carriers and new weapons, the Pentagon's got to clean up their mess first. It's real simple. You don't dump where you live and leave it for someone else to clean up. You have to take responsibility. And that's just, you know, a real basic thing. You can see the world as a whole, one big thing, or you can see it as your backyard, kind of, you know. And there are people that are messing up their backyards, dumping a lot of poisonous, hazardous stuff out there, and most people really care, and they don't do it to themselves. But a lot of the multinational corporations that are giving a lot of money to the politicians that are presently in D.C., that's what they're doing. And my opponent is one of those people that gets those checks. Believe me, I've looked. My opponent gets these $5,000 checks from these corporations that are doing us no service at all. And one thing, you know, I know Stan is very concerned with. You had a program last week on racism. And the issue comes up, and a lot of people kind of want to dance around it, and they don't want to say too much about it. And I don't exactly know, as a congressperson, what I can even do about it. But I want to say this. Race is a lie of oppression. You look from space, the planet, we're one people. We're not all different people. We all have the same organs. We all got 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils. We all bleed the same. We all really think the same. We all loved our children the same. And sometimes, yeah, we always hate the same too. But people, like the slavers, say back time before the Civil War, one way to justify slavery was to tell people being stolen from Africa and brought the United States to work for nothing, to be slaves. They were told they were inferior, that, quote, they're not quite human. And that's a lie of oppression. And that lie, the lie told to screw people over, to make them feel like they're not worthy, that somehow they're second class, has persisted in our society. And that lie has got to be met straight on. It's got to be called what it is, a lie, and opposed. And I'll do that in any way I can. You know, maybe it's just trying to make sure the housing and urban development treats all the zip codes in the country the same when resources are given out for housing. That it doesn't matter what color the skin is or what country people came from or where their ancestors came from. People get treated the same, because that's the only way for there to be liberty and freedom, is for the government to treat everyone the same. And we have this issue of pollution. You know, a lot of people talk about, I've met people in Hartford here that are working on environmental justice. Well, what's that about? What's environmental justice about? It turns out a lot of the worst chemical plants and the worst pollution and the toxins are located where people who were formerly slaves, well, not them, but their parents and great-grandparents, and other poor people live where the pollution's the worst. Cancer Alley down in Louisiana, where who lives there? Poor people. People of color live there. And in Hartford, you know what goes on? And this is tragic, and this is the sort of thing I want to try to stop. On a real hot day in August, this August, last August, DEP, the state agency, supposed to be the Department of Energy and Environment Protection. Well, I call them the Department of Enabling Environmental Pollution. I got a different name and a different view for what they actually do. People in those buildings, the people that are supposed to be protecting us. People working in the insurance companies and the banks in Hartford and all the corporations and business. Late afternoon, they're going to get on their smartphones and fire up the air conditioning where they live, right? And they don't live in Hartford. Some, but not most. And when they do that, there's a gas peaking plant, which just means it's a gas turbine down in the South Meadows, uses natural gas, going to fire up. And it's going to produce a lot of ozone, which is it's a form of oxygen, but it's a toxic form because it's molecular structure, the way it's built. And what's going to happen is you're going to hear the ambulances screaming to the hospitals with elderly people in respiratory distress, or the kids with asthma start coughing uncontrollably, being rushed to the hospital. And that's because of pollution, ozone pollution. And Connecticut is over the federal limits. And it's getting worse. But we don't have a government that's quite so concerned about people that live in Hartford. Say some people live elsewhere. And that's racism, and it's just wrong. You know, I don't know what to say. You know, my life, kind of done a lot of different things. Because people always say, yeah, you know, what you about, guy, you know? Long time, I was a house painter, just, you know, scraping paint, standing on a 30, 40-foot ladder, tough work. And done a lot of work repairing houses around Greater Hartford. And then my body's kind of crapping out and not feeling so great, so I said, wait, what can I do? I'll become a teacher. So I got certified out at Central to teach. And I did that, and I taught in Hartford for a while. Then my back really started hurting, and I couldn't stand still, sit still, as maybe you noticed. So I couldn't do that anymore. So now I'm kind of in a place, you know, can't work real hard, but one thing I can do is do what I'm doing. Going out and talking to people and saying things don't have to be the way they are. And the things are the way they are is because some people want them that way. And don't think it's just pure chance. There's some people, they benefit directly from the way things are. Let's talk about, say, health insurance a little bit. Okay, people worrying about health insurance. It's horrific in this country. People work hard all their lives. They have a home. They raise their kids. They get sick. And all of a sudden, they don't have enough money to pay for the hospital and go into bankruptcy. Their life savings are gone. All they've worked for is gone. There's no inheritance to leave to the children. It's gone. Why is that? In Europe, that's not the way it is. So we got to think about, could things be different here, where we live, and to our benefit rather than the benefit of the very wealthy? Okay, look at the salary of the guy at Aetna or any of these insurance companies. These guys are hauling in tens of millions of dollars, and don't think they're worth it, folks. Nobody's worth that kind of money. Nobody's that superior, that smarter, or anything else. So I'm for universal health care. Essentially Medicaid for all, you could call it, or you could call it veterans care for all. That essentially all health care is covered through our taxes and through a progressive income tax. And that'll do a lot for us. People, when they're sick, not feeling well, instead of waiting and getting sicker because they don't have money to go to the doctor, they can go to the doctor right away, and cancers can be caught early, or any diseases can be caught early. People can go to the doctors and get information or from health practitioners about nutrition. How can I eat more healthily so I'm not obese and I feel better and I look better, my skin's better, I feel more energetic, my mind is sharper. To get that and to eat right food. Part of health care is being able to eat nutritious food. And the food in this country, it's plentiful and it's probably relatively cheap, but the quality of it's really pretty poor. It's really poor. You buy meat and people say that's one of the signs of wealthy society, be able to eat meat lots of times during the week. Well, the meat's full of hormones. The animals have been fed pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and the quality of the food is not there. I think we've seen, you hear all the time, someone got sick at the salad bar at Denny's, Wendy's, or whatever. Because you want to know why? The food corporations, the money, they're given immense amount of money, and particularly the Republicans, to cut back on inspections for the food inspection. And people say, well, that's less government, and I want less government. Well, I say, you know what, I don't want less government protecting my food sources and making sure when I go into a restaurant or a food store, I'm eating healthy food. I want more government. I want to pay for it. I don't want to get sick from eating something that's got listeria or this E. coli bacteria or not. Sometimes we need government to protect ourselves, and that's one of my concerns in the health field. And you got to figure, think about it. You really kind of look at things. Where's the money? I take a dollar out of my wallet. Where is that health dollar going? Turns out that under Obamacare, which I kind of thought was an okay thing, up to 20%, 20 cents out of every dollar, the insurance companies could keep for themselves. They wouldn't even have to give it to any healthcare provider. They keep it for profit, administration, salaries, stock options for their executives, 20%. Then you talk to the doctors, you ask them, what does it cost for your office to deal with the insurance companies? How much time as a healthcare provider does it take to deal with the insurance companies? And they tell me a lot. And I've consistently, because I ask, I'm kind of a nosy guy and I ask questions. What does it cost you to deal with the insurance companies? And a lot of them say it's at least 10% of all healthcare dollars. 10% of every single bill you pay goes for administration of insurance. Plus the other 20%, we're up to 30% at least of all money we spend on health care provides no health care. None. Zero. Why are we getting screwed like that? And that's what it is. It's not like that in other countries. And people say, well, they're not as good, or you have to wait longer, or they don't have as advanced medicine. Well, that's not quite true. Because it turns out Japan, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, they pay a whole lot of money for health care, and they live just as long as we do, if not longer, and their health care is better. and they're healthier. And it's like these things, I kind of like drive me up the wall. We're supposed to be this rich nation that got all kinds of insurance, wonderful hospitals, wonderful doctors. And guess what? You look at simple things like infant mortality. Women dying in childbirth and infants dying before they're 2 or 3 years old. You look at, say, I'll just throw this out, the top 20 richest nations in the world. Guess where the United States is? Are we first? It's always USA number 1, right? Well, no. Not USA number 1. USA is number like 19 out of 20. Why is that? Why is that when we say the politicians, and I want to tell you, I've never run for office, and it's hard to say I'm a politician, but I'm running against one. Why is it? Who is setting the values in this country for what we want to do with money that's taken out of your wallet when you pay your taxes? It's a really simple thing. And a lot of people say, I'm busy. I don't know exactly what's going on. I'm trying to get by day to day. And I can kind of say, it really behooves you, really, it's in your interest to try to find out a little bit more about what's going on. And I would just ask, that you look at my website. It's tomforcongress.org. It's real easy to remember, right? tomforcongress.org. It's a real easy thing to tell other people. Just take a look and you see kind of what I'm about. There's some of my history of what I've done. We talked about racism a little bit. Am I a big anti-racist crusader? No. But did I belong anti-apartheid committee, Connecticut? Yeah. And I did little things and raised some money. I remember one time did a little bit of work to help Cornell West, do people know? Come speak at UConn. Not very much, practically nothing, maybe an hour of my time. Nelson Mandela comes to speak in Boston. I went up to hear him speak because I admire the man. And I think I might have mentioned before, I read a lot. And that's part of, being a citizen. Sometimes you just got to turn the TV off. I know we're tired and kids could be yelling and screaming, chasing after, and you got to go to the store and you got to do everything. But we have a really wonderful thing called the internet now. And computers are pretty cheap, You can get one for a week's work. And you just Google, you just type in something you want to know about it, and the world is there. And you got to take advantage of that to find out what's going on in the world. And there's a French saying, and I don't know it in French because my foreign languages are horrible. I took Spanish and I cannot speak Spanish, I tell you. ¿Qué pasa? That's about it. ¿Cómo está? Who benefits? Whenever you kind of look and see what's going on in the world, one way to think about it is, who is benefiting when this money is being spent, when this government is giving this contract to someone? Who's benefiting? And that's kind of my perspective, kind of look at things. Take the opportunity that's available to you, type in things and read about things, because there's a whole world, and it kind of, you kind of know something's kind of that way already. You feel it that way. You talk to your coworkers, and you talk around the table, and you kind of know it's that way, but you're not really super sure, or you kind of don't think you're in a position to tell others about it. And I run into people that say, well, I kind of agree with you, but I don't know that much, so I don't vote because I don't think I know enough. I just say, you know what? You really do know how to vote. And I do ask them this election, you don't vote for that guy, other guy. You vote for Tom McCormick, because all I can say is I sincerely think the world needs to be a better place. The world needs to be a place that's more for people than for the corporations. And I have a little tagline you'll see on my webpage. I'm for economic democracy, and we're not going to go into what economic democracy means at length, but it means one simple thing. People have more control over our economy. People have more control over how the corporations invest. We go to the store and we buy all these products, but the corporations that's selling them and making the profits, they decide the choices pretty much of what we're going to buy. And I'll end with this, because this is one of my big concerns, and it's been for a long time. There's an electric switch over there by the door I'm looking at. When you flip that switch, do you really care all that much where that power is coming from? You know, most people don't probably ever think about that. And maybe they don't care too much. I don't know. But when you do flip that switch over there, the electrons getting in that switch are coming from oil plants that pollute, and the pollution heats up the planet, and that's a huge thing. The oceans are coming up, and they're coming up fast. It gets from burning gas. We talked about ozone making people sick. It comes from nuclear power, particularly in Connecticut. And nuclear power, they tell you it doesn't pollute, but it's one of the most polluting things out there. You know, there's radiation in the yellowfin tuna out in the Pacific Ocean. Next time you eat sushi, think about that. That's where the switch comes. And I just simply say we need a different way. We need solar collectors on the roof. We need solar thermal plants where we can. And probably most of all, we need massive investment in offshore wind. Because when you flip that switch, it will mean the planet's not being polluted. People are not being made sick. And on top of it, it's going to be cheaper. So I just ask you, please, look at Tom McCormick for Congress and consider what I've had to say. Thank you.